Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of CDH The Lost, a podcast about CEDH. I'm here by myself again, kind of just winging it. It's May 14th. I don't know when the video is going to come out, probably today or May 15th. Doesn't really matter on that part. But on May 13th, yesterday, I forgot who dropped it, but someone did. The competitive MTR IPG addendum for commander events. This is like the major rules and like guidelines we follow when we go to like CDH tournaments of any kind really now. They've been widely accepted by most people. This is the stuff that has been changed since the original post has been posted and updated rules and stuff like that. So I wanted to take some time by myself to go through and talk about the rules and what I think of them. This document is intended to add to the MTR and competitive REL IPG. Please reference the MTR and IPG for policy not contained within this document. So this is adding on, or changing previous things. Let me open the Celsius and get a sip. The Celsius of the day is Grape Rush Sparkling. Pretty good. No real complaints. Anyway, tournament mechanics. MTRA 2-1. A match consists of a single game of Magic. In the event the game would naturally result in a draw, the match is considered to have ended in a draw. This is an update because in the previous rules, you were allowed to come to an agreement with the table of, hey, this game is going to go on for like 9 more hours. At the current rate it's going, let's just draw and restart, or like there's a king-making scenario. The game will just end in a draw. And in terms of like top 10, which I believe is now later down in the line, like what people are doing, or maybe that part doesn't matter. I lost my train of thought. Yeah, there's like in top 10 scenarios, if 3 through 10 are playing their games, there's 2 games going on. You used to be able to draw a game out, but now if the game just comes to a draw because that's what happens because of like a game action that repeatedly takes place without you being able to change targets and ending the loop, that will make the game go in a draw, and then that's based off of your the seed. So typically in a 10-person top 10, first and second gets buys for the final, and then third, fifth, seventh, and ninth will go into a pod. I think that's the numbers, and then 4, 6, 8, and 10 will go into a pod. That might not be exactly how it works, but I'm pretty sure that's how it works. Maybe it's a 3, 6, 8, and 10. That might be how it is. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. Now, if the pod with the third place player out of Swiss goes to a draw, third will go to the finals because they're ranked higher in Swiss. 2.2, players are seated in a predetermined order established by pairing software with seat 1 as the starting player. This is just to make it easier on either tournament staffs or even the players, so there's a consistency now where there's no confusion. It's just whatever the tournament predetermined order is by the software. We've been doing that for almost a year now. 2.3, commanders are revealed prior to shuffling and presenting decks. The game should not start until all players are present or 5 minutes have elapsed in the round. The commanders prior makes sense. It can help with mulliganing. Like obviously, if you have a seat 2 Rogsai, your seat 1 player can mulligan more aggressively for like a fish or a Ristic Study, where your third and fourth players typically have to go for like a free interaction piece most of the time if you're against a seat 2 Rogsai. And then, of course, you don't start shuffling or drawing your hands or resolving mulligans until everyone's seated or 5 minutes have passed. That's just kind of simple etiquette, but I'm glad that they state that, because it's good to have the rules written down, even though they're rules that most of us should already know. MTRA 2.4. When time is called, the active player finishes their turn. There are no additional turns. The game ends when the active player passes their turn. If a non-active player is acting in the end step of the active turn, time is called, the subsequent turn becomes the final one. Um, okay, so I think acting means like politicking and stuff like that. I think that's to the judge's discretion because most of the time, right before time starts, there'll be a judge typically present, depending on how many pods are still going. If a non-active player is acting in the end step of the active turn when time is called, the subsequent turn becomes the final one. Okay, this rule's interesting. If a non-active player is acting in the end step of the active turn, so if someone is politicking to try getting this to be the last turn, that's going to be a weird line. We're going to have to look down below and see if they have more rules regarding that or more better clarifications. MTRA 2.5, during a multiplayer game, players are encouraged to concede while they have priority and the stack is empty on their own turn. A player who needs to concede at any other time will be dropped from the event and must talk to a tournament organizer in order to re-enter. In the case, a judge will facilitate any mandatory actions of the conceded player until the stack is empty. In the event this happens in response to combat, the turn will be facilitated until the end of combat. So, like, say you're on like the last turn of like a combo player, like a Win Notice turn, or like a Glinthorn Buccaneers turn, and they need 3 opponents at the table. When you concede, they'll call a judge over and be like, "Hey, I'm a Glinthorn Buccaneer deck. I'm currently trying to present a win. They conceded at instant speed. Are they still technically at the table so I'm able to do my loop?" And then the judge will most likely say yes, but of course it depends on the judge, I imagine. But this rule's kind of being like, hey, concede at sorcery speed, which I agree with in a competitive sense. MTRA 3.1, any players receiving a bye will have 3 opponents added to their opponent history with a 0.2 win rate percentage. Okay, I like this a lot because I think it was previously they just didn't have a win percentage, which this is a bad win percentage. Don't get me wrong, this is like bottom of the score sheet, but at least it's still a win, right? It's just your win rate's not actually benefiting you, whereas previously I believe it was. And then we have an MTR 3.13, clarification on hidden information. Hidden information is a resource to be shared at the controlling player's own discretion and may be shown to as many players as they choose. If a player is shown the face or faces of cards in a hidden zone, they may not display those cards to anyone at the table who does not have permission to see them. Players, however, free to communicate this type of information both verbally or through written notes. Oh, interesting. I wasn't aware that you could now just write down a note and pass it to someone. That's super cool. Probably something I won't be doing, but I typically will just put my card face down and slide it to them and they can look at it and then use that information with what they will. So that's super cool. Example, while controlling a player with effects such as Oppo or Mindslaver, hidden information you legally have access to permits you to be able to share or reveal it as though it were hidden information you control. So, like, say you have a face down, an exiled card face down from like a Praetor's Grasp. If you oppo someone who has the exiled card from Praetor's Grasp, you can look at the exiled card and show the table so they know it's there. Which makes sense because you control the player. MTRA 4.1, the active player may request the table to stop excessively influence game actions to progress play. Failure to do so may result in unsporting conduct minor penalty. Okay, so I think clearly later through the article we're going to be probably told what a minor, major, and stuff like that kind of penalties are. At least I hope so. Maybe it's in the original one and I don't remember it, but that's okay. Minor penalties typically like a GRV. You can have multiple GRVs without losing a game. I think it's 3 currently. But I like this actually. So, if you have some yappers, I'm known to yap. Parker is like a known yapper. Atlas can be a yapper. It's cool that you can request the table to be like, hey, can you not basically be telling them how your opponents to play the game? Like, of course, yapping should still be allowed. I love my yap. But I think someone always asking someone what card I should cast in this moment is obsessive. I think if you're in a dire situation and you're like, hey, this is the answer I have, do you think now is the right time to use it? Because I'll use it. Is fine. Yeah, I like that rule. I don't know if it's going to be abused. It's obviously going to be at the judge's discretion if it is too much yapping or excessive. But I'll just have to see it in a tournament to see how prevalent it is. MTRA 4.8, addition to reversing decisions. Because CEDH is a social game, players can influence others. In order to allow for a fast and natural play, players may do so after an action has been taken in order to convince the action's controller to change their mind. This will naturally result in the player gaining new information, but if that information was shared in service of the decision being reversed, a judge may allow that player to do so. The judge must be sure the information was given in order to change the current play. Player B casts a counterspell targeting player A's spell, and player C tells B to hold it for something else. B may undo the cast. This is the rule that popped off on Twitter. Let me say, there was so much discussion, and in like local discords that I'm in, it's kind of insane. It's interesting because it gives an opportunity for players with less experience to take back a pivotal gameplay mistake. And it does allow like people like Atlas or Parker or the yappers of the world to even have a little bit more power, which I think is interesting when we talk about 4.1, where you can request the table to stop excessively influence game actions, and then this one is they put the spell on the stack and then they can undo the cast. It looks like it is a judge call though. It says, but that information was shared in service of the decision being reversed. The judge may allow that player to do so. The judge must be sure the information was given in order to change the current play. So you can't just be like, I'll cast counterspell on every spell and then talk about it. Because then I believe you do still have to call a judge in order to get it reversed. Because they do have final say. I believe this is what's happening. I think it's giving a little bit more power to a judge. I don't know if that's the case. That's how I'm initially reading it. Of course, I could be wrong. I'm just myself here. But this is another interesting rule that we're going to have to know. Appendix. Match points. Players earn 5 match points for each match win, 0 points for each match loss, and 1 match point for each match ending in a draw. Players receiving buys are considered to have won the match. All players listed on a match must agree to an intentional draw in order to report the match as such. Okay, so this is a buys or wins. Yep, we know. And then interesting because you can report your matches via the apps nowadays. All players listed on a match must agree to an intentional draw in order to report the match as such. Which I think just means you need all 4 people's signatures on either the match sheet, on this software, whatever it may be. But that makes sense. Pairing guidelines. Priority should be given to forming as many pods with 4 players as possible each round. In cases where this isn't possible, pods may consist of a minimum of 3 players to avoid multiple buys. Excuse me. However, no more than 1 pod of 3 players should be formed per round, ensuring that there are only 2 or fewer buys that are given due player counts each round. 1 second. Sorry, I had to sneeze there. Yeah, so this is pretty cool. Now instead of having like 2, 3 pods, it'll depending on the thing, it'll either be 2 people have draws, 2 buys, and then a 3 pod, which is sick. That's how I like it. Top Cut layout. Players in Top Cut will play in seed order with the highest seed taking the first turn. Pods for top 16 should be created as such where the numbers of players given to each seed. Ooh, this is interesting actually. Pod A is 1st, 8th, 9th, and then 16th. That is very intriguing because typically I'm used to assuming it was 1, 8, 12, 16 because then you have the worst of each of the next things, but I guess they're doing it like a snake where it's a first, worst, best, worst of their different categories. I don't mind it. It makes sense here for sure. But then like 12 and 13, you get the worst ranked player twice, and then this player who's middle of the pack. Yeah, I like it. Pods for top 10 should be created as such. Okay, so this is a little weird than what I said previously. Because I said 3, 5, 7, and 9, but it's 3, 6, 7, and 10. Which makes sense. It correlates with this. Tiebreakers. All players' tiebreakers will be calculated the same, regardless if a player has received a bye or not. Any player receiving a bye will have 3 opponents added to their opponent's history with a 0.2 win rate percentage. The lower limit for a tiebreaker is updated to 0.2 for all players. Yeah, I like this. Uh, This is interesting to look at. That's crazy that they have the numbers for 1,000 player tournament with a cut to 16. That's cool. Yeah, so most of the tournaments in Washington are going to be this 4 rounds, top 10. I know sometimes Marcus likes to do 5 rounds, but it'll be interesting. I guess he wasn't here recently, so this is probably the area we're going to be. And then Gabby's is probably here unless they have a large turnout, which will be cool. Turn skip. A player receiving this penalty will forfeit the next turn they would receive. The skip turn is treated entirely as though it did not exist. The next turn they take is treated as if they were the skipped turn. Okay, that makes sense. Gameplay error. In priority order, opposing players decide yes or no to place the ability on the stack. The ability is missed unless one of the opposing players decides yes, and the judge determines that it would not be too disruptive to place this trigger on the stack. Do not place the ability on the stack. Let me just check something. Yeah, my voice is still recording. Do not place the ability on the stack. Significant decisions have been made based off of the trigger being missed. Unlike other illegal actions, which must be pointed out, opponents may choose whether or not to point out their opponent's missed triggers. See IPG for upgrade path. This makes sense. Typically it goes with, once it gets to your turn in priority, you have the opportunity to be like, hey, my risk study is going to trigger. And then if it passes to you and then the other person says pass on the spell, it's a mistrigger because everyone else after you in priority also didn't let you have it and you didn't catch it in time. So you'll miss the trigger. I like how it says your opponents may say yes to the trigger for you, meaning like heuristic studies, like say Atlas is casting a spell, Parker has a heuristic study out, he says I'll pass priority, and then on my priority, because I'm going right after Parker, I'm like heuristic study trigger, we will put the trigger back on the stack because I said yes to the trigger. Which that's my favorite thing to do, is make sure that in a losing situation all my opponents hit their triggers because it helps me stay in the game. Hitting card error. The opponent's furthest in turn order from the active player who's not the infracting player is the opponent as described in the IPG. The erroneous set is revealed only to them, and they make a choice. They make any choices required for the remedy. The player making the decision may not discuss choices with the other players involved. I like this. This is a great upgrade. There was a other. Okay, we're back. I like this a lot. There was a tournament where someone put a card from a Vamp Tutor into their hand, and then the judge ruling was a Thoughtseize. So that player had to reveal their hand, and then all the opponents got to discuss what card. I like this one. I like how it's the furthest player in turn order from the active player, who is not the infracting player, which I like a lot. So, like, say, Atlas Vamp Tutored and put a card into his hand, and then Nick was our fourth player in the pod, so it's Atlas, Parker, me, Nick. Atlas is the one that put the card there into his hand. Nick would get to look at the cards in hand and then Thoughtseize one of them and put that card back into the deck. Or whatever the judge declares to be the correct action there. Tournament error. Oh, that's a warning, which is cool. Tournament error. Tournament errors upgrade after a player has committed 2 infractions in the same category. Tardiness, you get a turn skip. This was big in Philly. They were like, if you're 5 minutes late, you've missed your first turn. If you're 10 minutes late, you skip your 2 first turns. If you're 15 minutes late, it's a game loss for you. Which I like, because it incentivizes people to show up. This one does say players not in their seat within 1 minute of the start of the round will skip their next available turn. In this case, likely the first turn. After 5 minutes, the player will be counted as a no-show, receive a match loss, and will be dropped from the event. And then, of course, if you're still, like, say you're in the bathroom and you had a big one you have to let go of, and you were gone for 8 minutes, let's say, you have to talk to your tournament host and explain it to them, and then they'll see. It's up to their discretion to let you back in or not. And of course, I imagine if this happens twice, you're probably not allowed back in this case. Outside assistance match loss. A player, spectator, or other tournament participants does any of the following. Seek play advice or private information about their match from others once they have set for their match. Give play advice or reveal private information to players outside of their match who have sat for their match. During a game refers to notes other than Oracle pages made before the official beginning of current match. Interesting. Players no longer active in the game are no longer part of the current match, and attempting to influence the pod would be considered outside assistance. I like this. It is weird on during a game refers to notes other than Oracle game pages made before the official beginning of the current match. Because like in 1v1, you're allowed to have like a sideboard guide, or if it's like written out, or like a guide on how certain matchups play, I believe. So it's interesting that you don't have that. I agree that you shouldn't have like people's deck lists like Atlas or like myself even. We're pretty open about what decks we're playing, and then we'll have our deck lists typically have a primer with them when we go into a tournament, because he's typically playing Kenrith, and then when I play Fibblefip, that's obviously what I'm playing, and people know and they can look at the deck list because I'm very open about what I'm playing. Or even with Rogsai now, I'm very open about that. So this is interesting that you can't have like notes or anything. I guess that's fine. I'm trying to think if there's any situation where I needed notes. Let me just check that I'm still recording. I am. We're good at this. Yeah, but I like everything else. Like when you sit down, you can't be like, oh, Nick's on Turbo Nas when he's on Tassiger and not on Adnaz. That's not something you can do. Or like, hey, he's on a polymorph version of Rogsai. You can't do that, which makes sense. I like this rule. Deck list problem. The deck list is illegal. It doesn't match what the player intended to play or needs to be modified due to card loss over the course of the tournament. Turn skip. That's not that bad, honestly. Yeah, someone got a game loss in Philly, I believe, because someone accidentally stole their Grim Monolith. Like, they not intentionally. It was like a Praetor's Grasp or something, and they just walked away with it. Not the end of the world. They got the card back, but they had to lose the game because of it. But I like this because that is just a turn skip. Deck problem. Warning. The contents of deck do not match the deck list registered, and the deck list represents what the player intended to play. Considering there are no sideboards in this format, Only cards that are presented at the time of cut are considered, and any other cards stored in the deck box are not considered part of the deck. I like this. So you can't have, like, say you're an optional Jeweled Lotus deck, you can't just have Jeweled Lotus in your deck box, because if you could, like, reasonably play Jeweled Lotus and it's in there, and a judge went to go look, or another player, they can be like, oh, this guy's sideboarding or whatnot. Greatest example is our sideboarded Docksides. That's pretty sick. I do think everyone should bring a sideboard of about 15 Docksides that they set on their computer next to them while they play. It really makes your core vault very consistent, unfortunately. Marked cards. Cards or sleeves in a player's deck have inconsistencies on them that might allow them to be differentiated from others well in the library. This includes scuff marks, nail marks, discoloration, bent corners, and curving from foils. The player needs to replace the cards or sleeves with an unmarked version of it. If no sleeves are being used, use sleeves that conceal the markings. If the player is unable to find replacement cards, they may replace those cards with any combination of cards named Plains, Island, Swamp, Mountain, Forest, or Waste. As the deck list is being changed to match the new content of the deck, the penalty is a turn skip. This change may be reverted to a later point without further penalty if replacements or marked cards are found. Yeah, this happened at Cards Cast Unlimited. The guy who won the tournament, he had a ton of really cool original foils in his deck, but they curved. So he took a bunch of planes and wrote the card names on them, and that's how he played his games, which is super cool and funny. I don't know if he got a turn skip for it or not, but make sure you just have new sleeves. They're fresh. Even if they're not, like, super fresh, you'll typically be fine unless they're, like, super noticeable. One thing to watch with, like, Dragon Shield, if you're not getting from the same case of sleeves, you might just want to re-sleeve the entire deck, just because there is a discoloration between different cases of Dragon Shield. And you might get caught on it, probably not, but it's something to watch out for. Alright, tournament impediment. A player causes a delay specifically to the timely progress of an event, resulting in the consumption of additional tournament resources. A player leaves excessive trash in the play area after leaving the table. A player fails to follow the request of tournament officials to leave the play area. A player fails to provide match results in a timely manner. Yeah, don't be rude. They're giving you the time and respect to hold these events. Respect them. It's pretty easy. Don't be a douchewad. And then we have unsporting conduct. Minor turn skip. That's just a warning. But of course, if you do it enough times, you're going to get and cut and hopefully banned for life. Maybe not life, but turn skip. A player uses excessive, vulgar, or profane language. A player inappropriately demands to a judge that their opponent receives a penalty. A player appeals to the head judge before waiting for the floor judge to issue a ruling. A player continues to attempt to influence game actions after other players wish to continue play. Downgrade. A warning may be implied instead of a turn skip if the player in question displays ignorance or remorse regarding their actions. And the impact on other players is minimal. However, it is important to inform a player that subsequent penalties will be upgraded as per the standard rules. Document writers and contributors. We got Max Morna, Michael Aerosmith, Sarah Ara. No, that's Seth Ara. My apologies. Brooke Gardner Durbin. Yeah. So these are the updates of the new rules. They're pretty simple, and I like them. A lot of them. It is a little weird on, like, the notes and a few other things, but other than that, I like them. It was my first time reading them, and I hope you guys enjoyed my opinions and thoughts about them. But yeah, that's all I have for today. Live life, play Rogsai, live your best life.